are doing a research project or a dissertation, you are probably toying with the idea about whether you should use qualitative or quantitative data collection. So in today's video, I'm going to address the first one. I'm going to look at qualitative data, what it is, why it's good, why it's not so good, and some of the most popular methods of qualitative data collection. Now, this is really important when you are thinking about which type of data collection method to use, because it really can make or break your research project, and it's probably a pretty big project for you. It's probably worth lots of marks. So let's delve into this, let's cover it all, and make sure you watch right till the end to get all the information you need to really help you to do well in that dissertation or research project. So let's start off by looking at what is qualitative research. Qualitative research is not concerned with numbers. Instead, it emphasises words in the collection of rich and deep data. Qualitative research focuses on depth, meaning, and detail. The researcher tries to get inside of the minds of people and see things from their point of view. And it generally involves gathering lots of information about a small number of people, rather than limited information about lots of people, which you might get from quantitative data collection. And the information is generally not presented in numerical form. Qualitative research explores and tries to understand the meanings people give to a social or human problem. It understands emerging questions and procedures, so it's great for topics where we don't really know that much about it. The data is usually collected in the participant setting, which is often a natural setting. The data analysis builds inductively, which means it starts from the particular or the specific and helps to create general themes or rules. The researcher makes interpretations of the meaning of that data, and it recognises how complex and how complicated some of the things we study actually are. Now, when you are deciding whether you want to use qualitative research or not, the most important thing is to weigh up the pros and the cons, and you will have to write about this in your methodology chapter as well. And I'm not going to cover what goes into that chapter now, but I do have a video on that, and I will link to that one at the end. So what are the good things about qualitative research? What are the reasons why you might want to choose it? Well, qualitative research is great for examining feelings and motivations. If you want to understand why somebody does something or how they feel about that issue. Think, why is somebody motivated to go on a safari? Or do people feel safe when they visit Africa? Qualitative research allows for the complexity and depth of issues to really be exploited. We can look at deep, complex problems. And it also helps us to look at problems that we don't know much about yet and provide insights. But there are negatives to qualitative research too. One negative of qualitative research is that it generally can't be extrapolated to the whole population. It's not representative. Your sample size is just too small. It's great at giving us insights, but we can't say that that applies to everyone. It often provides a huge volume of data. This can be difficult to sift through and difficult to analyse too. It's not like you can run statistical tests or compare like for like a number. Often in qualitative research, we're comparing words and phrases that might be totally different. They might not even be comparable at all. And this can be really time consuming. So if you think that qualitative research might be for you, then you will want to decide what type of method you're going to use that uses qualitative data collection. So in the next part of this video, I'm just going to talk you through the major ones that we come across most often. The most common method of qualitative data collection is through the use of interviews. An interview is essentially a straightforward meeting for extracting and collecting data between people. It's a situation in which one person generally controls the questions, the interviewer, and they control the topics too, and the other person will answer those questions. Interviews generally seek to find out people's perceptions of things in their own words. And interviewee and the interviewer says is usually recorded, and it can be used for analysis in the future. And there are different types of interviews too. These are determined by the level of structure that is involved and how specific the focus is. And we generally have three major types of interviews. These are structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. So if you are going to do interviews, you need to decide which type you will use. Semi-structured interviews have a small amount of structure. So you might have some predetermined themes or topics that you plan to explore, and you might have a sort of shopping list type list of questions. Ultimately, the interviewer does have control, but they allow the interviewee to talk and elaborate where they feel necessary. Depending on how the conversation goes, the interviewer can choose to omit or take out planned questions and add extra ones too. Unstructured interviews have minimal structure. They're more of a kind of conversation with a purpose, really. There might only be a general idea of interest or concern that's predetermined. The interviewer and the interviewee are generally equal in the conversation. There isn't one leading it as such. Unstructured interviews do tend to lend themselves better towards people who have lots of experience in interviewing. In my experience, most students will use semi-structured interviews. Structured interviews often don't have the flexibility because they're very strict questions and strict answers, and you don't deviate from that in any way. It's kind of like a survey that you're reading out. So it often defeats the point of having that qualitative approach and the benefits that we get from qualitative research. So I find actually most people do semi-structured, so they have that list of questions there, they have that guide, but if the person they're interviewing wants to go off in another direction or wants to talk about something else, they can do that. And if you do want to do interviews as your major method of data collection, it's really important that you have the right skills, and you might be good at interviewing and you might not. And when you're doing a research project, one of the beauties of that is that you can choose how you do it. So you can play to your strengths, and I absolutely recommend you play to your strengths. Some of the foundations of qualitative interviewing includes being able to really listen carefully, listen to the answers that you're given, have a respect for and curiosity about what people are saying to you, and have a systematic effort to really hear and understand what it is they're saying. It's also important that you build a rapport with your interviewee, and persistent involvement with interviewees will allow for a deeper understanding of their perceptions and what it is they're saying. As an interviewer, you need to be knowledgeable, you need to know your topic, you need to be clear about what you're saying, avoid jargon and terminology that the interviewee might not understand. Be gentle with the person, let them finish their sentence, give them time to think. Be sensitive if this is necessary. Steer the interview, so keep it on topic. Be critical if necessary. You can challenge what's said, you can ask why, how, questions like that. And remember things. Don't ask a question if the interviewee has already told you that information. It looks like you're not listening and paying attention. Make sure it's balanced. Make sure you're interpreting what it is that's being said. And be ethically sensitive. Generally, when you're doing interviews, questions are open-ended. They're not easily answered with yes or no responses. It could be questions like, what do you think? How do you feel? In what way? The questions do need to be clear and simple though, to make sure that everybody understands what's being asked. And you might want to have some kind of direct or starter questions too, to get things going. When you're doing your interview, you will probably want to think about recording it, taking notes, making sure you get consent, give the proper introduction, etc. And think about how long it will last. You'll also want to make sure you have all the equipment that you need and that you establish and maintain a positive interviewing climate or experience. When you're doing your interview, make sure you're on time. Choose an appropriate location, not too loud, an appropriate environment. I strongly suggest you do a test run first. It could be with a friend or a family member, just to check it all goes smoothly. After your interview, reflect on that and also make note of things outside of words. Facial expressions, body posture, moods, etc. You can record your own feelings during the interview too. And some people will choose to do a focus group. So what is a focus group all about? Well, a focus group is essentially a small group discussion that's led or guided by a trained leader, which is probably going to be you. It's used to learn more about opinions on a designated topic and then guide for future action. Focus groups use a semi-structured or unstructured interview approach, but the difference is that there will be more than 2 people involved. It's a group. Sometimes focus groups involve the interviewees performing a task of some kind, which then becomes an observational technique as well as an interview. Focus groups can allow for a greater sample size. It's much quicker to do a focus group with several people than to do several interviews. Focus groups allow researchers to study ways in which individuals collectively make sense of something. Sometimes you can get more from a focus group environment because people hear others' responses and it encourages them and makes them think. Group interaction can lead to a wider range of views being expressed as a result, and you can also counter reticence issues. Furthermore, focus groups may make the interview situation less awkward or strange for interviewees, which encourages them to be more forthcoming. However, there are disadvantages to focus groups too. Other people in the focus group can influence the opinion of individuals, which isn't great. It can increase the length of time that it takes to transcribe. You're going to get a lot of content. And it can also be more difficult and time-consuming to organise and recruit, because you've got to make sure that everybody can attend the same place, the same time, etc. Focus groups will typically have between 6 and 8 participants as the optimum size. However, you can manage this as you see fit for your specific research project. The good thing is that you probably won't need to do many focus groups either, because you will collect so much data in each one. A good focus group should sound conversational. You should use words that participants would use. Don't use jargon and things that they might not understand. Make sure that all of your questions are really clear and try to keep them short. Questions should generally be open-ended. They might be one-dimensional and there needs to be some kind of structure, but not too much. Another type of research method that is pretty popular is a case study. Case studies develop an in-depth understanding of an issue or a problem, using the case as a specific illustration. It involves the study of a current, real-life case that is in progress in order to get the most accurate and up-to-date information. The case can be a situation, an individual, a group, an organisation, or something else you're interested in. You could, for example, look at a specific school trip and how the students respond to it, whether they enjoy it, how much they learn from it. That would be a case study. Or you could look at tourists who go to a particular hotel and what their experiences are like at said hotel. Again, that would be a case study. There are multiple forms of qualitative data that can be collected through case studies in order to get a really in-depth understanding of that case. And you might want to have more than one case in your project so you can do some kind of comparison. Lots of people will choose to have a kind of case study plan. So they'll look at the background information about the project, the context and perspective, why it's taking place, the issues investigated, relevant readings, etc. They'll then look at how can we access it, what resources do we need, what kind of schedule for data collection do we need. They'll think about the questions and the research questions, aims and objectives, and then how they will report it. And another popular type of data collection is through observation. Observation is essentially watching, really. It's watching people, watching actions, behaviours, etc. This is generally a flexible research method, with the main aim being see what you can see. It's qualitative, of course, and there are 2 major ways that you can observe. You can be non-participant, i.e. like a fly on the wall, just watching, or it can be participant observation, where you are actually involved. So for example, if we're looking at experiences of tourists at a particular hotel, perhaps you are also one of the tourists at that hotel. The ultimate goal of observation is to have a rich description or narrative of the whole scene as you interpret the reality and the significance of what's going on. Participant observation is a method of qualitative data collection that's developed by anthropologists. i.e. people who research people. It requires listening carefully and observing what's going on to acquire a deep understanding of the people in the social situation. And it involves making records of what you see and what you witness. You might have a fieldwork diary or keep field notes. As I mentioned before, there are different roles that you can play as the observer. You can completely observe and stand back. You can observe while participating in whatever it may be. You can participate while you are observing. And you can just completely participate. There are some ethical questions though when it comes to complete participant observation, because we really should tell people that they are being observed, and oftentimes complete participant observation might include you kind of going under the radar. And whilst in some situations this might be appropriate, oftentimes in your research you will be asked to explain the ethics behind this, so you might want to avoid it. And the last type of qualitative data collection that I will address today is netnography. Now this is a term that most people haven't heard of, but most, especially young people who've grown up with the internet, love it. It is easy, it is modern, it's contemporary. Okay, easy might be a bit subjective, but I like it, and I have made a video all about netnography in detail. I will link to that at the end, but for now I'll just give you a really quick overview. Netnography is essentially ethnography that takes place on the internet. Ethnography is the examination of culture sharing groups with the purpose of uncovering shared patterns or beliefs, values, behaviours, etc. So therefore netnography, which is actually a relatively new research methodology, adapts ethnographic research techniques, i.e. looking at how cultures behave and react, etc. But we're looking at that through the internet. And there are many places on the internet where we can look to gather this rich and really useful data. We could look on social media, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whatever. We can use blogs, discussion forums, review sites like TripAdvisor, comments that are posted on website and website content. All of these areas have lots of data that we can use for our research. I think netnography is great. It's new, it's contemporary. It gives us access to data that we might not otherwise be able to access. Saves us time, saves us money, and people may be more open on the internet too. There are a lot of people who say, sadly often bad things, that they wouldn't dare say face to face. The content is naturally occurring and is not intended for research purposes. However, there are disadvantages too. It can be difficult to identify who that author is. You may not be able to gather a true understanding of the context. Take Instagram, for example. We all know we post our best pictures on there. It's not really the whole story. And there could be ethical implications. Have the people who posted this content online given permission for it to be used in a research context? This is a current debate whether you need this or not. I suggest you check with your university or college when it comes to ethics. So, qualitative research is fun. I personally like qualitative research. I always lean towards qualitative. I've dabbled with quantitative too. I definitely have, but for me, I like qualitative. So the important thing is you need to think about you and what works for you. And are you good at talking and looking at words and deciphering meanings and interpreting things? Or are you more a number person? And if you are more of a number person, then you want to watch my video all about quantitative data collection.